Here is my promise to you. This video is an eye-opener. After watching this video, you will see a lot of things very differently. I believe that the system that we live in is intentionally made confusing so that a very small minority of people can benefit vastly while most people lose over time. Intuitively, we all feel this, right? We feel how it's harder to build a house, how it's harder to pay for education, and how a small minority of people suddenly has all the wealth. But why is this actually? Isn't the US GDP growing over time? So all the goods, all the services that get produced every year, that kind of line tends to grow over time. And so according to this chart, people should have it much better compared to say 25 years ago. The GDP grew by 170% since then. But here's the first way how the elites trick you. This is measured in US dollars, and we all know how US dollars inflate over time. The Federal Reserve prints more money, more debt is being created, and so of course a dollar today is worth much more than a dollar say 100 years from now. And when we look at those long time frames, right, this chart starts in 1960, can we compare the dollar at that time to the dollar today? The answer of course is no. This line going up is not showing how the US economy is becoming more and more productive. It's actually showing how US money supply increases. Because this is US money supply. It looks very similar to the US GDP graph, doesn't it? When the money is worth less and less over time because more and more gets created out of thin air, then of course everything is going up. Stock prices go up, house prices go up, and the GDP goes up as well. Right? It doesn't really make any sense that property, for example, gets more expensive over time. A house is a house, it should have the same value, it should potentially even decline in value because let's say a new house is probably more desirable than a house that's 50 years old. But let me show you the first eye-opener of this video. Check out this chart. This is the US GDP divided by US money supply. The US economy didn't really perform that much better over time. Since the end of the 1990s to today, the output actually declined by 40%. If the monetary base was just stable. So it's no surprise that people have it harder now. It's objectively harder. Yes, there are more dollars in people's pockets, but those dollars have devalued quicker than the rate at which incomes went up. Now there's something even more problematic about this, because this shows the entire output of the US. But the output is not necessarily equally distributed, right? We all know how wealth tends to concentrate over time. Let's have a look at this in numbers. So here we've got household income distributions, and this is from 1967 until 2022. And we've got, first of all, this nice history, but also we've got this split up, as in we can look at the lowest 20% of the country or of households, and we can look at the top 5%. And so we see how incomes tend to develop over time. How quickly are they actually growing? And so here we go. I've crunched the numbers. In 1967, the bottom 20% of households had an annual income of $1,600. That same bottom 20% is now at $16,120. The top 5% used to earn $28,000. Now they earn roughly $500,000 per year. Those numbers are interesting, right? It tells also where we stand relatively speaking. So we can clearly see how there's a growing gap between the two, because the bottom 20% only grew their income by 4.3% per year, and the top 5% grew it by 5.4%. And over that time period, that means that 2 generations ago, the top 5% made roughly 17 times of the bottom 20%, and now it's 31 times. So even a delta of only 1.1 percentage points over long enough of a period, it does move the needle. Now my impression is that those numbers probably even underrepresent of what's actually going on, because the numbers that we see over here come from the US Census Bureau. And I'm not sure if the top 5% are really showing all of their income as transparently as the lowest quintile. There might be income streams from companies that are not based in the US. There might be quite a bit of diversification, and that reduced transparency might in the end underreport of what actually happens with that cohort. But let's simply just take this for the truth of what's going on. Still, that are the growth rates of the different income cohorts. Now we've just made this very common mistake again, right? We compared dollars over the very long term and we did not adjust for monetary expansion. Now, how quickly does money supply over time grow? The numbers are official, right? We can just have a look at the data point over here. We can have a look at the data point over here. And then we see a somewhat stable growth rate over time. This is now the money supply on a logarithmic scale. So here are the numbers. In 1959, the monetary base was only 286 billion. Now it's 21 trillion. So there's now 75 times more money floating around compared to 1959. This is a growth rate of 6.8%. Now this is super interesting, right? 6.8% is faster than even the top 5% can increase their income. So that means that even the top earners, even the households that currently make $500,000 per year, they are falling behind. Now, who are they falling behind against? How is it possible that the top 5% of earners can't keep up with the monetary debasement, that even they have it worse over time? And the big question is, who is winning from all of this? Right? When it's so many people that don't win from this, that don't appreciate in their income as quickly as money is debasing, who is winning from that debasement? I think the answer is people that already own assets, so people that don't have to sell their time, and people that have very cheap leverage. If you can borrow money for less than 5.9% per year, then over time that debt devalues and you're making money with that. This is how people got rich with real estate. It's not that the house appreciates that much in value, right? This is the common thinking. What I think happened is that because of the mortgage that has a low financing cost, that debt devalues. So you're only paying 2 or 3% per annum, but the debt actually devalues by 6% per annum. And so you're making 3% profit on whatever debt you have every year. And that then also explains the capital concentration process, right? The more capital you have, the cheaper you can potentially leverage that. Now check this out. This is the S&P 500, so US stocks relative to US GDP. Now the official story is that the stock market is just a reflection of the US economic activity over time. But if that's true, why do we have all of that volatility here? Why does the S&P 500 relative to the US GDP fall by 75% over the span of 17 years? And why does it then outperform US GDP by almost 400% over the span of 18 years? There's obviously more going on for stock prices than just economic output. And I don't have a crystal ball, but when I look at a chart like this does not necessarily tell me that I want to own a lot of stock. This chart starts in 1961, and it does give us a story that sometimes stocks can be overvalued and that the volatility is much larger than most people believe. And it's also very important to know that it can take a very long time to just get back in terms of purchasing power, to have the same fraction of economic output again. This here was an entire generation. This was 30 years. I have a look at this chart. This is gold relative to the US GDP. Those cycles are very long in nature. And what worked for your parents is probably not going to work for you. If you're buying gold when it's very cheap, you can outperform versus economic output by 400%. If you do it the wrong way and you buy gold when it's very hyped, you can lose versus economic output by 90%. That's also another interesting story, right? Gold is not necessarily less risky than stocks. This top to bottom is 90%, but the top to bottom for stocks is only around 70%. So stocks over the long term might actually be somewhat less risky. And so that's why it's so important to understand the game. The vast majority of people lose in the system. The vast majority of people don't know how this all works. They talk about appreciating stock markets, appreciating property markets, but it's all just the money that gets less and less valuable over time. The US economy is indeed struggling. It makes sense that it's now harder today than it was 30 years ago. The GDP in same dollars is declining. Household incomes cannot keep up with monetary debasement. And yes, if you're a high earner, you're affected by this a bit less than if you're in the bottom 20%, but still you're affected. And so even if you're making $500,000 per year, your income on average is not going to grow quicker than the monetary debasement. So you will be able to buy less and less rare and limited things over time. Of course, mass-produced articles, mass-produced products don't appreciate that quickly. But if you want to buy land, if you want to buy exclusive education, if you want to buy high-end medical treatment, those kind of things are going up with monetary debasement, which again is 6.8% per annum. We are all forced to play the game. We all have to buy the assets that are currently cheap. We have to sell them. We have to rebalance the portfolio when things get more expensive. And instead of hyper focusing on the micro, trying to find out what's the best stock in the stock market, it's much more important to focus on where is the general macro going. What kind of asset class is likely going to do better? And so the decision between gold and stocks and property and Bitcoin, that decision is more important than trying to find out what's the perfect stock, what's the perfect altcoin, what's the right kind of house. Financially, those decisions don't matter as much. If it's your first time over here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. I know my thinking around this whole system is rather uncommon. Most people think about this much more simplistic, but if you want to beat this market, if you actually want to earn more than the average person, if you want to benefit from the system, then feel free to also check out the premium membership. So there's more than 100 tutorial videos on how to beat various markets, how to do proper risk mitigation, how to do rebalancing in a portfolio, and then also how to potentially beat crypto. So that's also a market that's still very inefficient, right? Most altcoins are plain trash, and we can make money by betting on falling prices of altcoins. That's currently what we're doing in the premium community. So see you again on YouTube or see you in premium. Cheers.